Hey there, it's Christian from 7 Gaming Network, and I'm here with the Star Wars Destiny Tactica, and this one's a big one. Sometimes in our games, if they're linked with things like movie franchises like this one, there are certain characters that we so look forward to seeing what these games designers do and how they bring them to life in the game. For me, in something like Star Wars, a character like who we're looking at now is one of the big ones, because it is that scoundrel himself. It's Han Solo. So we want this one to be a good one, and thankfully he is. He's a very good one. So to start off with, I'm going to go through the card, I'm going to go through the die sides. We're going to look at his ability, we're going to look at how you could use him in decks, what his role is, how you could play against him, a whole bunch of things. So first of all, he's a legendary character. So he's a little bit more expensive to get hold of, or a little rarer and more difficult to get hold of. And he seems to be, along with Vader, probably one of the most sought after cards in the whole set. And that's understandable, it's Han Solo. In terms of what he does, I think he's quite specific. And so it's not like he goes in every deck, he doesn't suddenly turn every deck into an amazing deck. That's not how they've done, of course, the power level for rares and legendaries in Destiny. But what he can do very well. So let's have a look at these dice sides first of all. Right, he's got 2 damage sides on his dice. Now, they're good, but the one costs. So we see that he's got a 2 ranged and a 3 ranged for 1 resource. Okay, so that is a lot of damage, and it's consistent damage as long as we've got some resources around. Now, when we're playing yellow, that tends to not be the most difficult thing. Yellow does tend to have more resources around, really I'd say, than the other 2 colours. So that isn't necessarily any sort of big drawback or big problem. The thing is that I think up until now, and I'm kind of addressing almost a meta in this first early set, the Awakening set, is that most people seem to see Han Solo as this aggro character, that he's there to dish out loads of damage really quickly. But that's not really what we see on the die sides. Yes, there have been some builds that have used him that way, and we'll talk a little bit more about deck builds, but what we're actually seeing here is we've got a 33% chance of rolling some damage, and that some damage is not insignificant at 2 or even 3, but the 3 you have to pay for. So if you're rolling this die and you haven't got any resources, you've got a 1 in 6 chance of rolling 2 damage with it. It's not amazing. Yes, if you've got the resource available, suddenly it's a 33% chance of rolling 2 or 3 damage, and that's a lot better. So with Han Solo, it feels like you need to have those resources around, otherwise his dice are going to be really quite neutered, certainly in terms of their damage output. So if you're using him for damage, and that's not terrible, it's good, you need to make sure that you are bearing in mind always you've got to have resources for when it's Han's turn to roll and to try and get his dice resolved. Now, that's somewhat easier, and I'm going to jump one of the die faces, as you can see, because he's also got 2 resource sides. And again, that fits really nicely with his theme, so I'm pleased that they've done that. But what's interesting as well is that with 2 of these resources on there, that's not really helping the aggro game. You could sort of say, well, it is in the sense that it's helping his 3 range side, but you can see what's happening here. He's having to use his own dice to power himself to do damage. That's not very efficient. So I think perhaps what might be helpful is to think about, well, actually, what is his role? Because if we're thinking of a character's role and then trying to assess their die sides, that can make a big difference. So let's look at this other die side that we haven't talked about, because 2 resources is strong. We really like that. That's going to power lots of upgrades, or Lots of cool tricks and events, of course, that Yellow and Yellow Hero has available to them. And we'll look at 2 Disrupt. I think this so far has been really quite, I guess I'd say, overlooked by many people when they're trying to build around Han Solo. A 2 Disrupt side is a really, really strong side in terms of the control that that can give you on the battlefield. Especially when Han is really built to work around ambushing. And of course ambushing can often mean that you can roll and resolve in some way or some fashion. And if you think about this 2 Disrupt side, if you get to maybe do some like a hit and run, maybe you're playing him with Leia, so you've got access to red. Well, he can resolve, right? You can play hit and run at the start of your turn. He can roll. You're going to get your 2 Disrupt, and you can straight away steal. You can kill off your opponent's resources for the turn, right from the get-go. That's a very strong control play. We're building him around ambush, and it also gets him a shield because of his ability. So, and let's have a look at his ability. I think this is almost a double-edged sword, his ability. No, that's the wrong phrase for it. It's either something you build your deck around, or it's total gravy. And so some of the deck lists that we have seen so far, or most of them I would say, tend to lean towards stuffing decks full of ambush cards and ambush abilities to make sure that we take advantage of loading Han up with shields. Now that is helpful because he has only got 10 health. So I say only, but that's not a lot, and it feels like those shields are really super helpful in keeping him alive. And it's quite frequent that when you're playing against Han, if they've got any sort of build towards the ambush, you're going to be having to face 3 shields at a time, or you are going to be feeling like you're sitting pretty behind 3 shields behind Han all the time. Just a little word on this ability. Again, I just love the theme. They've done such a great job of managing to marry the theme with great mechanics. This is that sort of thing of Han has ambushed, he's taken advantage of the situation, he's shown off how good he is, and not only is he sort of shown off how good he is and gets a couple of actions in a go, but actually it's almost like his bravado protects him, and as he's sort of bragging about how good he's just been or how fast he just was, and his sort of nonchalance, it ends up defending him, it ends up making him harder to kill, and he just grows in confidence. Love it. And the quote, sometimes I amaze even myself. It's brilliant. I love it. So this ability, it is strong, but I do think you need to have a sort of a decision to make of, do I build around it, or is it fine and it's just there as a nice to have? His survivability is significantly helped if you are trying to include more ambush cards, of course. Infamous, that's a really super great card for 1 resource. To be able to make any yellow card you play have ambush on it is brilliant, because it means at least 1 yellow card a turn you're going to play is going to stick a shield on him. So there's all sorts of play that you can use with that then, because there are ways you can sort of take a bit of damage, hold your Infamous back, and then you can be using that to play out cards towards the end of the turn to get shields back on him, so Han is shielded up back at the start of next turn. There's all sorts of timings that you can play with, when you play your ambush card to take advantage of that ability. All sorts of ways of getting those shields back on Han, using them up, getting them back. Now then, in terms of decks that we find Han in, well, the big one has been this sort of Han, Rey, ambush, aggro. So Rey is only 12 points, Han is 18 in elites, so really nice round 30 points for 2 elite characters. Now, it's an interesting deck that it's done so well, but really what it's taking advantage of is it's taking advantage of lots of ambush cards, and so it's using cards like Holdout Blaster, which has got that sort of built-in ambush, and all sorts of events that have got ambush on them. And what it's doing is it's trying to sort of ramp extra actions, and when you combine that with Ray's ability, which, I mean, her dice aren't great, but her ability is so good that you can frequently end up with, when it comes to your action, you end up having 3 actions. Even for, I've seen one turn where a character had, my opponent had 6 actions. They were upgrading holdout blaster over holdout blaster, and they had 2 infamouses, and all sorts of things were going on that enabled them to have just loads and loads of actions all chained together. Now there's pros and cons to that, but it can be really powerful. It can be rubbish, and it can just use up your turn, and it can go wrong for you, but most of the time having 6 actions on the trot and completely breaking the rules of the game is going to be a really powerful thing, and that's really where Han becomes so good in those kind of decks, because it doesn't matter what's happening with his health or with his shields. You're going to be able to get those shields back up, and it takes an opponent being quite savvy to how they get around those shields, whether they're timing their intimidates correctly, or they're resolving their on the hunt die correctly, to actually manage to counter that. As another great example of theme, it's a yellow bounty hunter card on the hunt that completely counteracts Han Solo. Again, that's just amazing design, guys. It's so good. It just oozes throughout the whole of this game. Anyway, I'm going to stop going on about that, because this Han Ray ambush aggro deck, it's strong, it's good, it's winning lots of games, and it's winning tournaments. But actually, I want to posit a potentially different way of working with Han Solo, and that's actually to build a more control-y Han Ray deck. So remember, with Ray, we're getting access to blue, and so blue has a lot of control options, but so does yellow. In fact, I was only just discussing with a member of my Star Wars Destiny playgroup last night, and we were looking at and talking about that combo of the Millennium Falcon with the hyperspace jump, the event, and how once hyperspace jump is in your discard pile, you can be using the special on the Millennium Falcon at any point to boom, kill the round, kill the enemy. It doesn't matter if your opponent could have 9 damage sat on the table unresolved. If you get the special off of the Millennium Falcon, that's the end. They're not going to be able to do anything with all that damage. In fact, I don't think there are many stronger control plays in Destiny at the moment. So what I'm feeling is we've got 2 resource sides. We've got cards like Millennium Falcon. We're looking at yellow and events like that. We've got a 2 disrupt side. We've got an ability that is going to essentially keep Han alive for longer. These are all sounding like elements of a control character, and I'm really thinking that as time goes by, more and more control builds will be seen with Han Solo in, who's then also, they've then got the resources and they've then got the focus perhaps to turn Han to his sides and do the damage that's necessary on the turns when it works. Okay, so I would say his role is sort of damagey control, is where I put it out. You can also have, of course, Han Leia, and it being red does open up quite a few interesting cards. I mentioned Hit and Run can be really nice with Han, and who doesn't love that theme? Come on, that's a great theme to be playing those 2 together. Playing against him, I find that if they're using him to try and just dish out their damage, Han and the upgrades that go with him tend to rely quite a bit on sort of ranged chains, trying to get that 1 black side and then some mods. And so single dice manipulation can really hurt Han Solo, really can make a big difference. 10 health, if you can find a way to stop those shields getting on him through the ambushes, i.e. if you're playing quite a discard heavy deck, so he's not getting to play much ambush stuff, that can be a really good way. And of course On the Hunt is a fantastic way of getting rid of his shields and removing one of his character die. That's really strong. You can of course hit their resources, so if you go after disrupting them, so they're not getting to do things like play out their ambush cards, they're struggling to have cards out like the Falcon and do those more control-y things, that can be quite nice. And of course it helps to stop that 3 range damage going off. And as I said, he relies upon those range chains, and most of those decks rely upon the range chains going off. So if you can find ways to disrupt those, you're probably going to neuter most of the damage that Han can chuck out. So there it is, Han Solo, an absolutely iconic character of Star Wars, and I think they did a really cool job of bringing him to life in the game. He's control-y, he can do some damage, he's shielding himself up when he shows off. It's brilliant, and I'm sure for many years to come, as long as this game's running, he's going to be in builds and looking pretty good. As ever, if you want to leave comments of anything I've missed out, please do so, and until the very next video, keep playing Destiny. See you now.